Betty White. Two simple words that can still light up a room, summon a grin, and stir memories of TV nights spent laughing until our sides hurt. The golden hair, the soft voice with its sly comedic edge, the twinkle in her eyes that made her look like everyone's favorite grandma, America's sweet, sassy queen of the small screen. But what if you knew the truth that lingered just beneath the surface? The truth her tight circle protected for decades. The truth that only now trickles out from the shadows she left behind. Because behind that gentle grin was a woman of steel, a wartime volunteer who once gripped the wheel of a supply truck through blackout nights, a gun tucked under the seat while bombs thundered overhead, long before the Emmy statues lined her shelves, before she stepped onto the set of The Golden Girls to deliver those lines we still quote today. Betty White was rolling across the battered roads of World War II, a member of the American Women's Voluntary Services who didn't flinch when things got messy. She didn't ask for medals or attention, she just did what needed doing, then locked that part of herself away, like an old diary she never meant to share. That iron resolve followed her into the business that tried to tell women they couldn't run the show. She didn't listen, she created. Life with Elizabeth, becoming one of TV's first female producers, her name on the credits at a time when boardrooms were filled with gray suits and cigars, not pastel cardigans and gold hair. But Betty didn't waltz in with wide eyes and naivety. She calculated every move, smiling sweetly while rearranging the pieces of her life like a chess master who never lost sight of the end game. Those who were closest saw it. She kept her circle, tighter than a Hollywood contract. Friends were chosen carefully, secrets even more so. She never had children, not because she couldn't, but because she wouldn't. "My career is my baby," she'd say when pressed. But family members whisper about the day Betty turned down an adoption that would have changed everything. Some say a sibling never forgave her for it. She'd slice people out of her life with that same dazzling grin that won her 6 decades of fan devotion. You'd never suspect it if you only watched her wink at a camera or roast an interviewer with a line that left them speechless. And that was her power. The velvet glove covering the iron fist on the Golden Girls set. Audiences saw Roseanne, the Minnesota sweetheart with her scatterbrained stories about St. Olaf. But behind the scenes, tensions simmered hotter than a Miami summer. Bea Arthur, her legendary co-star, despised the way Betty worked the press, playing up her good girl image until Bea looked like the perpetual villain. Crew members talk about how Bea would storm off mid-rehearsal, scripts flapping in the breeze, cursing Betty's name. Betty, she'd keep that smile fixed and let the storm pass. Privately, she outmaneuvered every PR nightmare, letting headlines blame Bea while she strolled away, untarnished. Decades later, Bea's son admitted his mother resented how the world saw only the saint in the cardigan, never the ruthless survivor underneath. And then there was poker night. You didn't know Betty White was a card shark. Sit down. She didn't just play, she destroyed. She'd lean across the felt table, eyes glittering, bluffing NFL legends out of their wallets. One story says she made a Hall of Famer weep over a $100 pot. Her longtime assistant said she never showed mercy at cards, in business deals, in salary negotiations, sweetness on stage, killer instinct behind the scenes. If you asked her friends, they'd say it wasn't cruelty, it was strategy. Betty White always played to win, and she did more often than any other woman in Hollywood history. But not every night was glitz and games. As the lights dimmed and the world kept aging alongside her, the private regrets started to drift into her quiet moments. Her assistant of 2 decades once confessed that when Betty's laughter faded, she'd sit in her favorite chair with the TV off. No reruns, no highlight reels. She'd stare at old nature documentaries, her voice low, her mind wandering to people she never called back, family she shut out, friends she couldn't forgive or be forgiven by. Near the end, she refused most visitors, not out of bitterness, but out of a stubborn pride that said she'd die as she'd lived on her own terms. When she did let people in, it was for one reason: to talk about the animals, the dogs, and cats she loved more fiercely than any producer or fan club. She left behind strict instructions that her animal rescue work must grow, must thrive, must outlive the trophies and gossip columns. Only when she was gone did her family begin to whisper. The truth stayed sat on for so long. A niece stepped forward and said, "America saw a fraction of who she was." The woman who could soften a room with a giggle was the same woman who'd once told her business manager, "Burn that bridge. I don't need it anymore." She'd fought for equal pay before the phrase was fashionable. She'd told off Studio XX who wanted her to stay quiet, sweet, and in the background. She'd made choices about love, motherhood, family that some people will never forgive, and she never apologized. She didn't need to, because for every severed tie, she built 10 more connections with people she could trust, causes she could champion, laughter she could spread like wildfire across decades. So, here we are, sitting with the truth Betty White always knew would find its way out eventually. That she wasn't just your TV grandma, your funny great aunt with the body jokes, and the quick tongue. She was the supply truck driver with a pistol at her hip when the world was at war. She was the producer who told men to step aside so she could rewrite the script. She was the poker shark who'd take your chips and smile while you figured out how she'd done it. She was the friend who'd stand by you through anything unless you crossed a line she couldn't accept. Then she'd vanish. Just a Christmas card and a polite thank you for the memories. And she was the legend who knew that legacy is a fragile thing, that kindness can be armor, that being underestimated is an advantage, that millions of people can believe they know you and still have no clue who you really are when the camera is shut off. That's why the final wishes she left behind weren't about statues or reruns or anniversary specials. They were about saving creatures who couldn't thank her, couldn't gossip, couldn't betray her secrets. Dogs and cats and horses who'd never tell tales about the adoptions she turned down. The sibling who couldn't forgive the late nights she sat alone replaying the moments she'd never get back. So maybe the real story of Betty White isn't just that she was America's sweetheart. It's that she was tougher than any studio boss who thought he could tell her no. That she was lonelier than any headline dared guess. That she was more loyal to the causes that couldn't speak than the people who sometimes spoke too much. That she was a blueprint for every woman who's ever had to play nice in public while fighting like hell in private to hold on to what mattered. The next time you watch The Golden Girls and hear Rose spin a goofy story about Steve Olaf, remember this. Behind that wide grin was a mind always calculating, always watching, always keeping score. And when the last page of her life turned, she closed the book herself neatly, quietly, on her own terms. Because that's what Betty White always did best, surprise you. Even now. Tap the bell to never miss a beat.